Hi, this is Bonnie. This is episode 4 of the podcast The Power Redneck, and this one's called Letters of Redemption. You're probably wondering how I get a lot of the information that I talk about in my podcast. I get it from numerous sources. I have my docs file, as I said, that was 1,000 pages long. And I also have a bag full of letters that was passed on by my auntie to my sister Joy. And now it belongs to me. I'm in possession of it. And a lot of those letters are about my father and mother's early years in Australia, how they were still together, how they loved each other. And my dad was like, Prince Charles and Princess Diana have the same age gap as me and my mother. I won't say her name. But this episode is just, I'll try to explain my parents. So they came out from New Zealand in 1977. They had a small child, my older sister. But my father had lived in Australia beforehand. In 1969, he was studying at the Church of Nazarene in Thornley, and he was studying theology. So he was very interested in religion and the study of religion. My father was extremely knowledgeable about certain religions, whereas my educational background was I read about Islam in an Encyclopedia Britannica, and I didn't really have much exposure to religion after we left the care of my father. So my foster parents my foster father was supposedly Catholic. I don't know the religion of my foster mother. We never went to church once when I was in the care of my foster family, and I lived with them from the ages 7 until 17, where I moved out of home and moved into a flat by myself. My father, when we lived with my father, we used to go to the Church of God at Waratah. It was an Italian church, and I always remember people were so kind to us. They were friendly, they were kind. It was a community, and they treated us kind. And my dad would go to any church. He could talk about the Bible to anyone. And what really frustrates me is I'm still in contact with my mother, and their divorce was very bitter and very drawn out and protracted, and mudslinging, and not looking at the interests of what their children would face if they continued to fight each other in the family court. And what eventually happened was that no one won. My mother did not get custody, my father did not get custody, and we were placed in the care of the Bradleys at Marywar, which is a rural town in the Hunter Valley. And we lived there for about, from 1988 till 1992, so about 4 years. And then in 1992, we moved to a property called Chinchilla, and that was 30 kilometres out of a town called Kula, where I did my high school from like year 7 until year 12. Both my parents were privately educated. My father went to Hamilton Boys School, which is a pretty good school. I'm sure it's got alumni that are politicians or leaders or actors or who knows what else. And my mother went to a school in Nelson in New Zealand called Waimea College. And the motto of my father's school was, in Latin, I don't know the Latin, but the English translation is, a wise man carves his own fate. And I think my mother's Latin motto was Semper Contritit or something. I think it means like always strive in Latin, I'm not sure. So they both had Latin school mottos. My school motto was, there is virtue in the struggle, not the prize, or something. I think that's what it was. I'm speaking very softly because it's late at night. Yeah, so I was when we went to the Bradleys, we were put in a Department of Community Services government car. I remember it was a white Commodore. And I've told this story to many people, but we basically drove in a car from like Newcastle to Marriwell, which I think is like maybe an hour and a half or something. But when you're a small child, it's actually it feels like a long period of time. And when we got there was a green wraparound veranda on an old homestead house, and we just sat there crying on the farm. I mean, I think in a lot of ways our upbringing was privileged because, we got to see animals and horses and cows and sheep coming from suburban Newcastle in Housing Commission. And as I said before, like I'm sure the Department of Community Services tried to put us with relatives, but as I said, my family was the only people in Australia, so the rest of our aunties and uncles were all overseas, and a lot of them had families and responsibilities of their own, and taking 4 children is a big responsibility. So yeah, and that concludes the podcast for tonight.